Okay. Why textiles? Well, I'm sure that's been covered quite a bit already by previous speakers. In terms of its social and economic significance, clearly it was an incredibly time-consuming and labour-intensive activity. Dros Krupa in Gostennik suggests it was a productive activity second only to agriculture in the ancient economy. And certainly its outputs were essential and valuable as a means of reflecting status, prestige, and also as transferable assets. Jennifer touched upon the possibility of it being carried out at different scales, domestic, workshop, industrial, but even within those individual scales, it was probably, it could have been carried out within each of those models as outwork, as it was right until the Industrial Revolution. There's also the question of its perceived ubiquity. Certainly, large numbers were involved. As I said, it was incredibly resource intensive in terms of production along the chaîne opératoire, from animal husbandry, fleece preparation, spinning, dyeing, weaving, fulling, and then to any trade and exchange that did go on. And obviously everyone wore or used the finished products as well. Socially, it appears to have crossed gender, status, and age boundaries. However, archaeologically, we know there are relatively few textiles extant. We do have large numbers of textile tools in Britain: loom weights, spindle whorls, weaving combs, but unfortunately no looms. And there is this perception of ubiquity on sites. But loom weights are actually relatively rare in the north in comparison to the south. Certainly in the north, it's spindle whorls that predominate in the material record. And even they don't appear to be ubiquitous. Fraser Hunter's research in his Craft in Context paper in Hunter and Ralston 2015, he only found around about 26% of the sites he examined had loom weights, spindle whorls. So there appears to be a need for an assessment of presence and absence to establish just what the distribution pattern was and how that may inform how the production process took place and what role it played in society. So the study of the production of textiles does provide the opportunity for synthesis. It extends beyond the textile back into farming practices for raw materials, into the environment for access to vegetal and mineral resources for dyeing and fulling, landscape and topography affecting not only settlement and farming systems, but communication and trade also. So my research questions, and I guess I should point out here, I am part-time. I've just gone into my second year. So really, I'm only sort of 7 months into this. So I'm still very much in the reading, researching, establishing parameters stage. So my research questions, first of all, what was the nature and extent of textile production in the northern British borderlands? What was the role of textile production in late Iron Age society and economy? What was the impact of the arrival of Rome on that production and practice? And what can change and continuity in textile production practice reveal about socio-economic development in the region? This harks back to my master's, where I was looking at the possibility of local production of the Vindolanda textiles. And what was coming out from that, and particularly an examination of the Vindolanda writing tablets, is there was a degree of localized trade going on, sort of below the level of the formal military supply system. So it's just at what level that textile interaction was going on, and what impact the introduction of that new market had on textile production in the area. In terms of the location of the northern British borderlands, which is quite a mouthful, but it's quite a difficult area to define or describe when you're crossing both the modern political boundary between England and Scotland and also the perceived boundary of Hadrian's Wall. So basically, I'm covering an area that in the south stretches in the south from the Tees Valley across Stainmore, and at the moment it's including Cumbria, and in the north it goes across basically the line of known interaction or known Roman influence. The green lines represent sort of catchment areas that I'm currently studying, and they largely relate to the in Scotland they relate to the scarf framework areas, and in Scotland the national in England the national framework areas. The green dotted line represents very roughly the northern boundary of villa occupation in rural areas. So what I want to capture is what was going on in a relatively, I suppose we can call it, Romanized area in the south of my research area, compared to areas where there was very little Roman civilian influence. It was very much military controlled area. And I'm interested in what the difference is in an area that was controlled by the Roman military compared to the more civilian province further south. If that makes sense. Methodology I'm looking at is I'm at the stage of database development, gathering data from site reports and surveys, and that includes environmental surveys. Bone assemblages are particularly important to try and assess the age of sheep at sites. The older sheep are likely to have been retained for dairy and for wool. Younger sheep likely kept for meat. I want to produce a study area overview to just try and get a feel for the distribution of textile production and the presence and absence of textile production to see what the pattern was. I'll then look at specific case studies selected on best available data basis, and then data analysis, interpretation, and production, hopefully, of distribution maps, and then more detailed study area and case reports. So that's the approach I'm intending to take to the topic. And then also adding in an assessment of what was the Roman impact. So overlaying that distribution pattern with the Roman data that we have available, which is obviously much more detailed than the Iron Age, but to see what change, if any, came in. The challenges, I'm not an archaeologist by training and background. Even my master's degree was very much classical studies based, although I undertook an archaeologically oriented dissertation. So I'm on a very steep learning curve just on that. Also database development, LiDAR, all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty difficult at the moment for me. Dating and chronologies is going to be an issue. The title is Late Bronze Age to Roman, you know, the end of the Roman period. really, I'm hoping that I can narrow that down to the late Iron Age, but the difficulty of dating, precise dating on some of the sites I'm working with may be difficult. So I'm keeping it quite open at the moment. Data collection, analysis and presentation, how to do that. As I said, database development is going to be a big one for me in terms of the progress of this. But outputs, I'm hoping to produce some maps that will be of use and actually clarify just what was going on in Northern Britain in comparison to the South. Data summaries so that we can actually identify just what information is available by site, by area, and hopefully by region. And from that, produce the study area overview and case study reports I was talking about. And hopefully that will provide a synthetic evidence-based assessment of the nature and extent of textile production in the region, and an evaluation of the impact, if any, of the arrival of Rome on textile production, and indeed on socio-economic development more widely in the northern British borderlands. So that's it.